G'day mate, how the bloody hell are you? Welcome to In the Back of My Head podcast episode 95. We are steaming towards episode 100. 100 of these things that nobody needs or asked for. It's a creative journal where I ramble on, rant and rave about creativity, whatever's in the back of my head, try and make some sense of some things, try and clear the clutter, try and get out of my own way, trying to get out of my own head, try and just get on with it, mate. And this episode is in response to the White Stripes being welcomed into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I can't begin to tell you how much of a White Stripes fan I was or am, but especially was as a teenager. Introduced to them by a good friend of mine at the time, no longer. And from the jump, completely changed the way that I feel about music, completely changed the way I feel about creativity in general. Jack White was, or is, my biggest hero, creatively speaking. But as with all heroes, the more you learn about them, or the more you listen to them talk, the more inconsistencies you find, or the more inconsistencies with the vision you had of them you find, paints them in a different light, adds some nuance, adds some murkiness, some gradients, some grey areas, some fog, some haze. And Jack White, to me, is absolutely no exception to that rule. I'm a huge fan of the way that Jack White speaks about creativity and about his way of making music. But he's also getting on. I don't know how old he is. I'm assuming 50 plus. He's 50, bang on 50. There you go. And as with any artist who is getting on, and especially anyone who is obsessed or is addicted to old tech, who romanticizes old tech such as Jack White, surely then you are going to have some funny views on modern technology and modern approaches to things, and views on what the kids are up to. So I've heard him say some flippant remarks, some dumb shit, and I have reeled from those comments as my hero bumbles his way through some dumb points. However, I went into his speech, his acceptance speech, with more expectation of disappointment, and yet I actually found myself, I was expecting to be more critical, and yet I actually found myself agreeing with 90% of what he said. And even the one point that I'm going to extrapolate out into this rant, I mostly agree with, bringing credence to the idea that there is nuance in everything, and especially in an acceptance speech where you must give sound bites. The whole point is to give sound bites. So why in the world would he give a nuanced take on a particular topic when it just needs to be quotable, it just needs to be tight, concise, and delicious? And in fact, while I was listening to his acceptance speech, I found myself tearing up, found myself weeping like a babe. As it's a very rose-tinted glasses, nostalgic kind of thing, and very much like, take me back to when there was a bright horizon and hope. There was a possibility around every corner. There was the world at one's fingertips of being a teenager, as a creative, as someone who's just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited to strum some strings and make the world their own. It took me back to these mindsets, and so I welled up. I was a bubbling brook. But he had this one part, this one line that goes something like this. It goes exactly like this. It's quoted. So to the young artists, I want to say, get your hands dirty and drop the screens and get out in your garage or your little room and get obsessed. Get obsessed with something, get passionate. We all want to share in what you might create. And I agree. End of video. Good. I agree in concept. I agree theoretically. The whole point of this podcast, the whole point of the way I talk to my mates, the whole way I talk on this podcast is to try and encourage people to make stuff without drama, without getting in your own way, without ambition, but with motivation. But there's something that irks me. There's something that tickles the back of my neck in a particular way that I do not appreciate when I hear older generations looking down upon people using technology, and especially the words "get off your screen," "get off your phone." It's a very kind of individualist sort of phrasing, and it's a very condescending phrasing. As if the argument is just there needs to be more people making stuff, just being creative, following that natural force, then I would argue there are more people creating now than there ever has been. And for every single clout-chasing, screen-addicted young person that is just creating for all the wrong reasons and putting it on social media, there is just as many people creating with reckless abandon for all the right reasons through pure whimsy. Through pure whimsy and curiosity. And two, putting it on social media for sure, but there's no trend chasing, there's no concern with like social capital. But they are in their little rooms on their phones creating cool shit. Because we've been gifted this set of tools of accessibility. Creativity being more accessible than ever. Anyone and everyone can do anything and everything. But the way that we put out material and the way that we discover material has changed. And these forces, social media and economic forces, are beyond us. Bigger than all of us. It is not an individualist. It's not an individual problem, but it is a collective issue. And I think when you say get off your phone, it's making it out as if this was your fault. That it's your fault that you're on your phone and not creating. When we can look around anywhere and see more creativity than there ever has been. But also, that if you were to say that to a drug addict, could you just put down the drugs and get on with it, mate? Can you please, for the love of Christ, create a beautiful oil painting? All you need to do is put down the drugs, mate. Put down the bottle, mate. Or do we blame the gambler for wasting their money on gambling? There is a level of personal responsibility, of course, to anything and everything that I'm talking about today. But there's also an external factor at play here that is immensely powerful. And as a creative, when you are first of all bombarded by social media, just as a consumer, that's one easy way to get addicted. All your mates are on it, so you better get on it, mate. And oh look, there's this little slot machine where you flick your thumb and you get a hit of dopamine every 10 or so because something's funny. There is enormous social pressure to be on social media. And then as an artist, as a creative, when you are also then told the only way that you're going to get your stuff out there in any capacity is to be on social media, then my God. You've taken me to the bar. You've taken an alcoholic to the bar. And then gotten annoyed at me for being addicted. As I spoke a little bit about this last time, about the social media addiction that I think we are all coming to terms with. Perhaps as we were like kind of toying with it, playing with it, but now that more people than ever are addicted to social media thanks to probably the COVID times, when there was nothing else to do but turn to the bottle, turn to TikTok, then now perhaps we are reckoning with it as a society. But a phrasing like "get off your screen" feels like you're talking down to an addict. And again, to desire for subtle nuance in an acceptance speech is obviously foolish. However, it also comes off as like kind of silly. And Jack White is obsessed with old tech. There's an era of tech that he fucking loves, which would probably be from the 30s to the 60s, maybe the 70s, but even then, I'm starting to push it. And anyone that runs away from modern technology, no, let me rephrase that. You don't need to take part in modern technology. You don't need to take part in using these tools. But to say that others shouldn't use them is absurd. And it kind of means that you haven't really switched on to what young people usually, but what people are doing with those tools. Even to go against 90% of what I've said about AI, same too with AI, that I don't want to criticize individual artists necessarily for using AI. I want to criticize them for being lazy. But if you can use AI in a way that drastically expands the work, or especially does something that you couldn't do without AI, then all the bloody power to you, mate. And also share that around. I want to know how you did it. Because I've seen some crazy shit done by AI that was actually impossible to do prior. And it took someone looking at this tool and going, oh, there's something here. If you can make something new before unachievable, fuck yeah. If you're regurgitating lazy shit, I mean, you could do that with AI. You could do that just by writing shit music anyway. So I guess at the end of the day, laziness, I don't really give a fuck how you got there. But if it's lazy, fuck off. But if you think inherently toying with technology is keeping you away from pure creativity, then you're an idiot. Which I, again, don't think Jack White is saying. But it's usually the comment sections, it's usually the conversations that get had when this kind of stuff comes up. When throwaway lines get run off with, of get off your screens. The kids these days, they're all addicted to their phones. And they're all fucking just skipping the process, as I talked about last time, by using all these digital tools, and they're not making it with guitars and drum kits. That's a conversation that gets thrown around, and it is extremely reductive of the incredible creativity and talent that comes about from technology and in this era of social media addiction. And I feel like I'm being reductive. I feel like I am boiling things in my head down to such a degree. So I guess I'm doing the same thing, and I'm also not entirely sure what I really want to say about this, but it all came at a similar time of just I've had it bubbling in my head a lot lately of putting too much agency on the self for external factors. And I think it's a counter, because I think we too often hear that. I think in this day and age you hear it thrown around so much that almost all the root of all of our problems comes from capitalism, which I throw around a lot. And so I get how that seems, again, reductive. I think I understand why those kind of phrases sound like they are taking ownership off the self. And we really like the idea that we're in control of our own heads, and that we are the ones that make all the decisions for ourselves, and that we can get ourselves out of this. We're in a mess, but we can get ourselves out with just a little bit of elbow grease. And you should work on yourself. And you should get off your phone and just make some stuff for the fun of it. To make yourself feel alive. To be part of community. To just do what you should be doing with your time on this earth. Be that making songs, or be that cooking something delicious, be that just hanging out in a park and just enjoying life and just seeing some mates, whatever. I'm not saying you need to actually create stuff. I am saying that obviously it's better to get off your phone and just enjoy the here and now. Obviously. And so too, if you are depressed, you should try and get yourself out of it. You should try and fucking put some work in. I don't want to also take away from trying to be self-determining. However, I think a lot of us have seen this, I'm sure. The self-help industry is booming. It's enormous because everyone's miserable and everyone's looking for a solution. And ironically, this podcast has elements of self-help to it. But I always get really frustrated when there's any self-help advice that really removes external factors. That if you're feeling depressed, and if you are feeling aimless, and if you are feeling like you don't have much value in society, then all you need to do is become an alpha, bro. Is take creatine and work out and get a high-paying job, and suddenly everything will fucking click. Have you considered cleaning your room first? Have you considered that you are not man enough? And to those people I say, have you considered that everyone's economically fucked, and the idea that everyone could afford a home, or just to live, just to afford groceries? Or have you considered the fact that most jobs are disappearing, or a sense of social value is eroded by late-stage capitalism? I'm not saying don't fucking try, and I'm not saying don't fucking work on yourself, but I am saying that there are external factors that have an enormous impact on your mental health and your well-being, and you should take those into account so that you're not so fucking hard on yourself, and so you're not so fucking hard on other people. You do your goddamn darndest, but you also need to reckon with the fact that there are external factors that are far more powerful than you as an individual. I'm really extrapolating this out. I'm really adding way too much to a throwaway line. This idea of get off your fucking phones, get off your fucking screens and make something. But the amount of power that big tech has just on our world, on our social lives, but especially on creativity, especially on the creative industries. The amount of power they hold is immense. And I've been thinking about the idea recently of, in a sense, giving up. Giving up on this project of trying to get stuff out on social media, get any of my creativity out on social media. I've been thinking of ways of getting out of that. I have an album that I'm working on that is very personal in terms of I don't really intend to put much behind it, like I have not done for any other project of mine really. But I got thinking about the way that I interact with my music and the way that I interact with putting stuff out there on social media, and toying with the idea of how much that is affecting my enjoyment of the creation side of it. That if putting things out on social media and putting things out on streaming platforms as a musician is really only gaining me 100 listens to a project, And how many of those are skim throughs? And so is it worth just putting it up on my own terms? Putting out an album only on Bandcamp or only on my website, or I don't know. Sending it out exclusively to a mailing list, or just calling your mates on the phone and handing it to them in person? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do any of that, but it's a hard thing to reckon with when you are trying to understand your own addiction to social media and to your phone in general, but that you also have to keep going back if you want to be an artist, or at least as you are told to be. At least you are told that this is how you do it. I heard Leah Senior talking about that as well, or rather I heard from somebody else talking about how they heard Leah Senior talking about that she would like the idea of putting something out solely on Bandcamp. And she's sort of leading the charge in town of getting off of Spotify and perhaps not being very present on social media. She's got an old school way of approaching music as well. I reckon Jack White would love her. But it's also all well and good when you already have an audience and a name for yourself. But it is funny telling it to a young person, to just a kid trying to make something. Hey, get off your phone and just make it, baby. Get out in your garage and make some shit. Again, conceptually, I agree with Jack. But I also think there is some serious nuance to the conversation of how we interact with these mega corporations that dominate our lives and our creativity, that dictate the way that we put out our work. And of course, you can do it however you want. You could just release your music carved into wax cylinders. But if you actually want people to hear your shit, and if you actually want to build something, then you probably need to be on social media. So you better fucking hope that you don't have an addictive personality and you get sucked down that rabbit hole. I feel like I've got a lot of other points written in front of me, but I feel like I'm just rambling and I don't really know what I'm talking about. We all want to think that we have total control and power over our own heads, and a lot more control of the world around us than I think that we do. Especially now. So I want everyone to try their fucking darndest to be the best that they can be, and to take care of themselves, to not be depressed, to be creative, to be lovely, to be around, to be a good yarn over a pint. But I also don't want anyone to beat themselves up or fucking beat anyone else up for being a bit fucking blue or being a bit addicted, because it's fucking hard. And we also live in the luckiest time ever to be a creative, so nuance and flip sides. Hey, if you disagree with me strongly, fucking hit me up. DM me and I'll respond to the next episode or something like that. And work together. You're fucked alone, but we're in it together, mate. I'm gonna go listen to Jack White's entire discography and weep like a little baby. Catch you on the next one, mate. Be so bloody well.